Today was rounds 5 and 6 of the Kenya Chess Open, the KCB Open 2018. And round 6 brought some of the most exciting games you've seen in the tournament so far. In one of the boards, Ben Nguku beat the highest rated player in East Africa, international master Arthur Sengwanyi, in a very small number of moves. But in another board, another Kenyan, Mehul Gohil, was playing East Africa's first international master Elijah Emojong. If you'd remember, Emojong had improved his rating significantly, but then he took a break from from studying chess to do other things in life, and his rating has recently dropped to below 2,300. I think at the time of this game he was rated 2296. But then this game today showed why he is one of the best players in East Africa, and indeed why even at his peak rating, which I think was above 2350, that was still significantly below his performance. So the game started. E4, Emojong is playing white, Mehul is playing black. Knight f6, the Alekin defense, and knight to d5, and Emojong played knight c3. Mehul took, and white took back with the d pawn. Now just a moment to look at this position. Black has a double pawns, yes, and unlike what has been taught before, he took away from the center instead of towards the center. But what this does, it opens up the space for the bishop on c1, and also opens up a file for the queen, and the d file is now open for use by white at any stage as a half open file. So white has very easy development and is ready to move out both bishops, the queen. Well, look at black. Not a single piece other than the knight can move. Quite an amazing position, to be honest. So black continued d6, attacking the central pawn. White played knight to f3 to defend the e5 pawn, but in fact it's difficult for black to take on e5 because that would allow the exchange of queens, and after white retakes on e5, there'll be a threat on f7, threatening to fork the king and rook. Just to show you what I mean, should black pick there, then white would pick on d8. Black loses castling rights, and then the knight would pick on e5, threatening the f7 square. As you can see, a slight advantage to black. But in fact, this very game shows me not to trust the engines too much, because it seems, whereas this is Stockfish 9, it seems as if there are certain things that the computers are still not very good at, and this will be a very good example to explain this process. So instead of pick here, black continued pawn to g6, and white played bishop to c4, a very active square for that bishop. A natural move, bishop to g7, and here white broke the second rule of chess openings. He moved a piece twice after. Sorry, let me remove these arrows just a moment, because they stand the risk of yes. So black played a natural move here. He played knight to g5. Now you've been taught don't move a piece twice before you finish development, but in fact here it's quite interesting that he should do this. The natural move to continue development in this situation would be to castle kingside, but then what would follow will be a brilliant shot. And believe it or not, black is almost lost here, because of course if you are to pick, bishop picks. If the bishop picks back, knight picks on e6, forking the rook and the queen, and that is an immediate exchange lost. If, for example, you are to pick, bishop picks and you move the knight away, of course the knight can come down to f7, again winning the exchange right away. But in fact, in that position, f4 will be a stronger move, and believe it or not, black still can't escape losing an exchange at the very worst. For example, if king to e8, then just h4, and now if you picks again, and if the rook moves again, c7 hangs, and the exchange is still lost. So this position is quite difficult, and this explains why in this position, after knight to g5, then black didn't castle. Instead, black played e6. But then now you can begin to see that black has made quite a number of pawn moves, not all of which help his development. And at the same time, he has significant dark squared weaknesses that are only defended right now by the bishop standing on g7. And white continued here with queen to f3, threatening checkmate. Against very strong players, it's move 8 and already checkmate threatened on the board. And the defense here, I thought in this position, black perhaps should just have castled, because I can imagine that black was worried about the possibility of queen to h3 here. Again, probably the only move will be h6 or h5, but h5 would allow g4, and after the knight comes back to f3, the h6 pawn is attacked. So to defend it, perhaps king to h7. But then already you can see the bishop can come to g5, and just looking at this, black's king side pieces are completely asleep at home. There are so many pieces next to the king. The black king looks a little loose because of the pawn moves. White can still castle queenside and advance the pawns, and you can imagine why for a human player this would look a bit difficult to play. Perhaps objectively there could be some analysis and continuations that make it possible for black to hold, but well, maybe super grandmasters can produce that for players of a caliber. Maybe it's not as easy. So you can imagine why then Mehul was hesitant to castle in this place and instead played king to e7. Instead of king to e7, the computers recommend king to d7. But as I'll show you from this very game, maybe it's not a wise idea to follow the computer's recommendations all the time. It seems there's quite a lot that computers may still not be able to see, even tactically. So here, the move that was played was queen to e7. Now in this position, international master Emojong played a beautiful move. It's knight to e4. So a number of things that you can see. Of course, the first one is the pawn fork on d5. Well, that will be a simple, clear mistake, because the knight just goes to f6, and you really cannot win one of the pieces. It's not really a fork. You see in this position, and the king is under attack, and this is actually not a very good position for black. Again, very many dark squared weaknesses. The pawn on f6 cramps black a little bit, prevents the king from getting escape squares, and white has the bishop pair amongst other advantages, and of course open lines and open files. So that wouldn't be a good way to go. The other thing that strikes you is that the pawn on e5 is hanging, and it can be picked two different ways. Believe it or not, the pawn pick is an immediate loss to black, and the move that would follow, again, those weak dark squares, bishop to g5, just natural developing moves for white, and black is just lost. Now here, what can black do? If black were to move the queen to f8, then immediately just a simple knight to f6 check, bishop picks, sorry, that's probably not the best move, queen picks, threatening checkmate on d8, and the knight has to come out. I think that's an almost, well, not an only move per se, but if the king were to move to d7, then castling queenside king to c6, and well, bishop to e3, with the checkmate to follow in just a few moves. I'm just trying to remember. Yes, this is before d5. So if you had to play a simple move of this nature, then queen times e5, and there will be a checkmate threatened on b5. Again, you will try your best to stop it, say with a move like a6, but then the king is already still mated, and then you check wins. So the only other move that white could consider to stop that checkmate would be knight to f6, but then here again rook to d1, and rook to d1 is a bit more accurate for a reason I'll show you. And now if bishop to d7 stopping that move, then just look at that. Queen bishop to bishop to h6, and perhaps here, you know, black has no alternative but to pick the bishop, because if you play queen to g8, then bishop to g7, and the whole rook is lost. But even here, if you were to picks back, queen has to come back, queen picks, king picks, but then the bishop on d7 is hanging. Look at that. I mean, black will then be a whole rook down. So it seems as if pawn picks is not possible. But what about bishop picks e5? Now, black hasn't had to make any further pawn concessions, but the problem is that he's made yet another move that is not improving development, and his dark squares remain weak. And so here as well, white continues with bishop to g5, attacking the queen. And in this case, queen, well, what could the queen do here really? I think the options are much limited. Let's try the natural move that looks like it's avoiding too many complications. F6, but F6 of course loses immediately to knight takes F6. It's a check, and the queen cannot move to a place avoiding a discovered check of some sort, or if it moves to d8, then there will be a queen pinned against a king, something of that nature. So here pretty much after this check, black would be compelled to take, and bishop picks, and perhaps the best move here will just be to play rook to to f8, bishop picks, rook picks, and here basically white will just be an exchange up really, for not for much. So f6 is not possible. What else can black play? Of course, bishop cannot interpose, and so the only move that can be played is queen to f8, and this is what Mehul played in the game. Now, well, after that, white followed with a very interesting move, bishop to b5, and Mehul played c6. Believe it or not, c6 is an only move here. Had he played, for example, bishop to e7, bishop to d7, then immediately follows knight to f6. You must take this bishop, this knight. Queen takes, threatening checkmate on d8, and knight to c6 will be an only move. In which case, then again, you've seen this tactic, bishop to h6, exclam, and again, if you pick, then the rook falls on h8, and black is simply an exchange up. Now, what else? If instead of bishop to d7, knight to d7. Well, this is just an immediate loss. This is actually queen or mate. Actually, mate will follow. Knight to f6 check, and now this time if the bishop picks, queen picks, and there is nothing to stop checkmate on d8, and so the pick is impossible. Black has to move into the way of the discovery, and knight to d7 check. And here instead of picking the queen, most of us would actually knight takes f6 is best, and bishop picks, queen picks, queen picks, bishop f6. That's checkmate. Wow, would you believe the number of tactics flying out in this position? So what else? Now let's look at the final possibility. What if this check, black blocked with knight to c6, which is probably one of the most natural moves? Then of course you could start with this pick, knight to f6 check. Again here you must pick, and now queen times c6, king to f7, bishop picks, king picks, and well, once again white is an exchange up. So the only move, believe it or not, after this check is simply c6, and after c6, well, white just continues, marches on, knight to f6 check, and pretty much again black is forced to exchange. Now look at this position. Now white has the bishop pair. There are dark squared holes everywhere on black's camp. The king side pieces are yet to move, but then there is a bishop under attack on b5. Well, no, actually at this stage there is a mate threat on d8 which has to be defended, and the probably the only defense as far as I can see is just the only defense as far as I can see is so here the move is that the only defense as far as I can see is king to d7. Now the bishop is under attack, so you can imagine what white is going to play. Actually you can't. White plays queenside castle, exclam. Now it takes Stockfish a while to understand what's going on here. If I just showed you analysis mode, it shows it suggests that black is just winning, you know, giving a +2, but in fact Stockfish 9 has got this completely wrong. The bishop sacrifice is actually sound, and you can just pick the bishop and it will change its mind once it gets to depth 29. I already checked it, and it will find that the bishop sacrifice is perfectly sound, and the reason for that is, wait for it, after c takes b5, the correct move, ladies and gentlemen, is a4, and that's precisely what international master Emojong played. Now a5 is a double exclamation mark for two reasons. Number one, white wants to play bishop to f4, attacking the pawn on d6. Now in many variations, then the pawn can just move up one step to d5, and that will be sufficient defense. But then if that happens in some lines, and as would happen for example in b takes a, then this would be played a5. You could immediately play the move c4, opening up further lines, and this will be checkmate in a few moves. What's a good example to show you how this would go? Where would you take this knight? Where would you take this knight? Let me see. Well, anyway, I looked at this variation. You can check it out by yourself, but really this these lines are not really good. It's really complicated really here for black. I don't think black. I think here you'd go to e5, knight comes to c6, queen comes to c3, knight comes to e7 defending that pawn, picks, and now here queen to e5, and black is completely lost, because here apparently the move that should be played would be queen to e7, but then again more or less the pawn still falls here. So this is one of the variations that could be played in this line. But b takes a is not possible. But there's a second reason why the a4 has been played, and it's an attacking reason, causing immediate checkmate. And so as to keep the pawn on b5, black may try to play the move a6, but in this position suddenly rook takes d6. Now this was not possible move earlier, and I'll show you why shortly. Now if king picks, then of course you can imagine there is a rook coming in, and then king f7, king goes up there, and now the main reason why a5, double exclam, and if black were to move to sh7, of course this is checkmate in 2 moves, and so essentially black is forced to pick the pawn, and now bishop to g7, c7 check. Am I getting this right? I hope I am. Yes. And here really black has no alternative but to sacrifice his queen, and within a short time I think it's going to be checkmate if it's not already. The king is going to come to c3, king to d2, rook to a1 checkmate, amongst other variations. So if I showed you back without the a5 option, what would have happened if black were to take right away in this position without a4? Then simply the king just escapes, and there is no checkmate, and white is completely lost. So a4 has a dual role as a move, and wow, what a move it is. So in this position, after white had picked the bishop, what a4 was played, and here black played king to c7. Basically this position is really bad, and there isn't much that black can do. Stockfish can't see it yet. You can see it play 24, but in fact the spectacular move now the human player plays, rook takes d6, double exclamation mark, and Stockfish still thinks that black is losing, but he changes his mind very, very quickly, because there's basically nothing that black can do, and the rook can't be taken. An example is if the rook were to be taken with the king, then bishop comes to f4 check, king goes to e6. Really I don't see what else could be done. Queen to e5, threatening a checkmate on c7. What could black do here? Let's see. Let's give it can we block it with say queen? That's probably well, there's another checkmate right here, so not good enough. So what else can, maybe pick the pawn, and if you pick the pawn, then you have c4, renewing the mate threat once again on b5. What can we do? Again, block it with the a6, and then queen to c7 check. So really this rook cannot be touched, and you can check that cannot be picked with the king. And if you pick with the queen, well, then you know what's going to happen, of course. Simply having the queen and the king on the same diagonal, and really it's a complete loss, that one. So instead of that, I think black saw this, and Mehul played knight to d7, and on knight to d7 then attacking the queen, leaving the knight hanging, and white insists on having the rook taken. Would you believe that? He sacrificed the pawn, he sacrificed the bishop, he sacrificed the rook on d6, and he's sacrificing the exchange now on d7. Grandmaster Elijah Emojong. Now this is picked. I don't think there's much of an alternative. And then here, to a small extent, the Grandmaster, international master, he'll be a Grandmaster soon, I believe. I lost his way a little bit, but not disastrously. Bishop to f4, and king went there. Queen to e5, queen came to e8. A bit of a repetition. Queen went back to f8, and then now the last final piece came into the attack with the rook coming to d1. Now here black played f6. Now f6 is an interesting move for two reasons. Of course, you can't pick with the queen. Picking with the queen should be exchanged, and I think black has not only survived, but black is completely winning. So here, of course, as you can see, this is just winning for black, who will be a rook up. But then if the bishop picks, which is what was done actually, then the bishop can no longer come to the active h2 b8 diagonal, where it has really harassed black, and that was the intention. So here black played rook to g8. However, black is completely cramped. There's pretty much nothing he can do. And what did white play here? Although it's an exchange down, you can see the black rooks are not connected. The king never has a chance to castle. The dark squared weaknesses are an abomination, and you know, what could black do? So here white just played the simple a takes b, and as you can see, the pawn structure for black is completely fractured, but that's not as important as his inability to free his pieces. So you can understand this wish to free the pieces that made black play the move b6, hoping that somehow he could bring the queen to c5 and you know, just try and coordinate some of his pieces. But that creates new weaknesses. Look at the queen side light squares, and look at that rook sitting on a8, and immediately this was attacked. Wow. Turns out there is no real defense to that, because really, what could black do? I mean, if you try a move such as that, then immediately there's a mate threat right away on f6, on c6 really, and you cannot pick the rook because that will be checkmate. So what did black do? Of course, there's a check right here, picks there, and yeah, most human beings will pick the rook on a8, not international master Emojong, who just prefers mate over a lousy simple rook. And once again, picking the rook, queen to c6, checkmate. And if you don't pick it, then there's a mate threat on b7, and of course if you try and defend that once again with the rook to b8, then simply queen to c6 is checkmate. After queen comes back, picks checkmate. In fact, it's even better not to pick with the queen. In the spirit of this exceptional game, then rook takes c7 is indeed checkmate. So congratulations to Grandmaster Elijah Emojong for this spectacular game. I don't know how international grandmasters, super grandmasters would rate this game, but you know, for me, looking at it as an African, I find it spectacular. I really hope that you know, he gets recognition for it. So this is a wonderful game. We'll see how the tournament games proceed tomorrow. International master Elijah Emojong playing versus Mehul Gohil, KCB, that is Kenya Commercial Bank, Kenya Chess Open 2018, round 6. See you tomorrow. I sign off. My name is Dr. Victor Ngani.